Hello, everyone, and welcome to Slash Film Daily for January 16th, 2018. On today's show, we're going to be talking about a little bit of news, including some Venom rumors, Fantastic Beast sequel details, Paddington 2 breaks some records, and Creed 2 casting. And in our feature presentation, we're going to be talking about the 12 most anticipated films of this year's Sundance Film Festival, which we will be covering for the site. This is Peter Sciretta, and joining me on today's podcast is Slash Film Weekend Editor, Brad Oman.
Hey, that's me.
And Slash Film Writer, Chris Evangelista.
Hello.
We are prepping for Sundance. We'll get to that a little bit later, but, news is still coming in a little bit slow, but we have some bites on the news vine today. Let's start it off with some superhero rumors. Brad, is Tom Holland as Spider-Man going to appear in the Venom movie?
Man, I hope not. So Amy Pascal, Kevin Feige, and Tom Holland have all said that the new Venom movie that Sony is currently shooting with Tom Hardy in the lead role as one of the most iconic Spider-Man villains is not tied to the Marvel Cinematic Universe in any way. It will be separate. It'll exist in its own Spider-Man universe, and there won't be any crossover there. However, a new rumor has come from John Schnepp, who is the director of the documentary The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, which recounts the whole debacle behind the abandoned Superman movie that would have seen Nicolas Cage as Superman, directed by Tim Burton. And he appeared on Collider's Movie Talk and said quite confidently and almost definitively that Spider-Man is going to be in Venom, and not just Spider-Man, but specifically Tom Holland Spider-Man. He says, for the past couple of months, we've been hearing how Sony is keeping it all separated, and Spider-Man is in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but every other character that's in the Spider-Man universe is separate. All I'm saying is that Spider-Man, and I'm talking about Tom Holland Spider-Man, is going to be in Venom. Now, while initially it might seem like that could be a cool thing by indicating that Venom is now part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that doesn't sound like something that Disney and Marvel Studios would allow to happen, because as far as we know, unless there's some secret deal that happened behind the scenes that no one's found out about yet, Marvel and Disney have no say whatsoever with what's going on with Venom, which is supposed to be this R-rated sci-fi movie that exists in a Spider-Man universe. So I can't imagine that Disney and Marvel would be too keen on sending their Spider-Man from the Marvel Cinematic Universe into an R-rated movie to make an appearance and have that movie tied to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, there's always a chance that maybe Tom Holland will appear as Spider-Man, and this Spider-Man universe will be separate from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but that sounds like it has confusion.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, it makes sense when you think about the idea of how Marvel comic books have different universes where the same version of a character exists, but I feel like when we're talking about, big blockbuster movies that cost millions of dollars to make, that sounds way too confusing for general audiences, and everyone's going to wonder whether they're connected. They're going to have to explain all this stuff. So I feel like this is either false, or maybe Marvel is being a little bit bold and they're doing something secretive. I don't know. I feel like the best solution is, if you want to have Spider-Man in your Venom movie, just make it a different Spider-Man. Like, use a live-action Miles Morales. Or, if Sony plans on continuing to expand their Spider-Man universe like this, why not introduce someone like Spider-Gwen into the mix and, start building a female-centric Spider-Man universe?
They'll confuse people even more, I think. The thing is here, I just don't think Disney would trust Sony to develop this movie, which is an R-rated movie, and put their character into the... It seems like the deal that they made was that, the Spider-Man movies, Disney is kind of doing most of the work, and Sony is distributing. So it just doesn't make any sense. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, a Venom movie doesn't make much sense without Spider-Man. So, I don't know. I'm very conflicted. I know John Schnepp has been reliable in the past, but for some reason I don't buy this. I don't know. But let's move on from superhero news to the Wizarding World. And we have learned that all 5 Fantastic Beasts movies will be set in different cities around this Wizarding World. Chris, what do we know?
Yeah, so the first Fantastic Beasts film, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, was set in New York City. The second one is apparently the Crimes of Grindelwald is set in Paris. And now David Yates, the director who is going to direct all 5 of these films, confirmed that every single film is going to be set in a different city. They're keeping the future cities under wraps right now. They're not saying what the next city will be, but apparently that's the sort of gimmick, I guess you could call it, for these films, that every film is going to be set in a whole new place, which is going to just be expanding, I guess, the world of the story.
I think the problem here is, with the Harry Potter movies, I like the characters. The world is incredible, but I like the characters. In the Fantastic Beasts movies, I don't particularly like any of the characters. But I do like the world building. I like J.K. Rowling's The Wizarding World. So if these movies are going to give me a look more at this world, at different corners of this world that we did not see in the Harry Potter films, I think that might be worth it. I mean, we'll have to see. I'm not sure. But let's jump back to superheroes. Let's jump back to Marvel and Disney. Our next story revolves around Avengers 4 and Chris Hemsworth. Avengers 4 will finish off Chris Hemsworth's Marvel contract. Does that mean it is the end of Thor?
Yeah, Chris Evans confirmed that Avengers 4 is the last round that he is contractually obligated to fulfill as Thor. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that Thor is done with. As we saw back when Robert Downey Jr. finished up his contract with Marvel, or at least was coming close to it, Marvel renegotiated with him for the last 2 Avengers movies, Infinity War and Avengers 4, and also added into the mix his role in Spider-Man Homecoming. So renegotiation is always possible, but the interesting thing about the timing of contracts expiring right now is that Avengers Infinity War and Avengers 4 are going to shake up the Marvel Cinematic Universe quite a bit, because they're dealing with Thanos as a villain who will likely be taking down some Marvel superheroes for good. He's supposed to be this huge threat to be reckoned with. He'll have the Infinity Stones and the Infinity Gauntlet at his disposal. So it seems like we're going to see some superheroes either retiring or being taken out through doom, essentially. Whether Thor is one of them remains to be seen, and there's really no indication that Thor will die. We know that when the next era of Marvel movies comes into play, which what you would call Phase 4, essentially, they'll be expanding a lot more. There'll be a lot more cosmic stories, and they'll be focusing on the newer superheroes that are being introduced over the next couple years, like Black Panther. Ant-Man will continue to expand, Captain Marvel, Doctor Strange, those kinds of heroes. And the core team members from the original Avengers, Thor, Iron Man, Hulk, and all them, will start to go by the wayside a little bit. Now, Chris Hemsworth and Taika Waititi had already talked about some potential ideas for Thor 4, but Kevin Feige has already said they're concentrating on Avengers right now, not really sure what will happen with the future. And again, even them talking about ideas doesn't necessarily indicate that Thor is definitely going to be alive. Some might consider like any talk of Thor 4 as a spoiler, but let's not forget that James Gunn and Michael Rooker also made it look like Michael Rooker was going to be in Avengers Infinity War by having him take a couple pictures on set with an Avengers Infinity War crew hat and everything. And that was to throw people off the scent that Yondu died in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So they're pretty good at keeping secrets at Marvel, and it's really hard to tell whether Thor is actually going to be leaving the Marvel Cinematic Universe after Avengers 4, if Chris Hemsworth will renegotiate his contract or not. We'll probably have to wait until after Avengers 4 comes out to see what happens.
Now, I know I've already said this on this podcast, but I think at the place that Thor Ragnarok, the last scene of Thor Ragnarok ends, it kind of, they're giving less reason for there to be another Thor movie, in my opinion. And it seems to add up. I don't know anything that you guys don't know, but from a storytelling perspective, it seems to add up that Thor is probably going to not make it through these next 2 Avengers movies. I would personally, and I've said this before too, like to see Valkyrie take on the role as of the mightiest Thor. So we'll have to see what happens there. We still don't know what is really going to happen after Avengers 4. I think the closest we've heard is Black Widow movie, and that's in the scripting stage. So we're going to have to wait and see. Paddington 2 hit theaters this last weekend, and has been very critically acclaimed, earning itself in one of the highest positions on Rotten Tomatoes listings. Chris, tell us about it.
Yeah, so 2018 is very young still, but already the most acclaimed film of the year is Paddington 2, which took its place on Rotten Tomatoes as the fourth film to score 100% with over 100 reviews. The other films are Toy Story 2, the documentary Man on Wire, and a French film called Things to Come. Of course, everyone probably remembers last month, Lady Bird had that distinction for a long time, and then some guy came along and said no and destroyed its chances. But it's also, Paddington 2 is also the second family film in history to remain at 100%. And the first is, of course, Toy Story 2, which I mentioned a minute ago.
I was actually kind of wondering how long would it take after we wrote the story on, what was this? Was this on Friday or was this yesterday?
I think it went up yesterday. Yeah.
It went up yesterday. How long it would take for this to get ruined, because nobody wants, whatever movie to have this distinction, and it's still at 100%. So
give it time. Someone will rise to the challenge of destroying that 100%.
Yes. Maybe the guy that brought down Lady Bird, because he seems to be vindictive like that.
Yeah, he likes that. Yeah.
Yes. Let's move on to our last story, which is a bit of casting for Creed 2. They have finally found Ivan Drago's son. Brad, tell us about it.
Yeah, so a while back last year, Sylvester Stallone had been teasing that they would be bringing back Dolph Lundgren as Ivan Drago, and that the Russian boxer's son might be the next big opponent for Michael B. Jordan's Adonis Creed to face in the ring. And there had been rumors that they were looking to fill the role. There was an MMA fighter that named Sage Northcutt who said that he turned in a tape for an audition for the role. But at the time, we still didn't get confirmation that that was the role he was auditioning for, or if there was any truth to what Sylvester Stallone was teasing, or if he was just testing the waters to see if fans were interested in that kind of angle. But now we do have confirmation that Ivan Drago's son is indeed a big part of the sequel as a new opponent for Adonis Creed to face. And he'll be played by real-life Romanian boxer Florian Munteanu. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. Apparently his nickname in the ring is Big Nasty. And if you check out the article we wrote on Slash Film, there's like this fitness promotion video of him working out and doing insane things that I wish that I could do with my body. He is just ripped and huge, and he looks like an intimidating dude. So hopefully he's got the acting chops to back it up as well to be a good performer. And not to say that Dolph Lundgren was necessarily the best actor, but so
tell me this, Brad. I'm looking at this photo of Big Nasty, and Big Nasty's arm looks bigger than all of Michael B. Jordan's body.
That it does.
How is it possible that they fight in the same? Don't they have like a weight limit, or like heavy? Like, isn't there like you fight in the same class?
They do. Yeah, they do have weight classes in boxing, but there's no telling that maybe Michael B. Jordan isn't going to bulk up a little bit more for this match. There's also, as we've seen in the previous Rocky movies, there were also underground matches. Even Creed and Sylvester Stallone had a match that was fought off the books. That was a secret fight. So maybe the fight that they have won't be an official match, and that's how they end up getting in the ring together again. What'll be interesting about this is that Ivan Drago is the one who is responsible for killing Apollo Creed in the Rocky franchise. So it seems like Adonis is definitely going to have an axe to grind when it comes to facing his son in the ring. And I'm also interested in seeing exactly what it's like when Sylvester Stallone and Dolph Lundgren run into each other again.
And for our feature presentation, we're going to be talking about our 12 most anticipated films of the 2018 Sundance Film Festival. And joining us for this conversation is Slash Film senior writer Ben Pearson.
Hey, what's going on?
Not much. So, guys, we all head to Park City, Utah tomorrow for Sundance. I've been going for many years now. I think 2004 was my first. Ben has been there a couple times. Brad, how many years have you been?
This is my 7th year, I think.
And Chris, you're a newbie to Sundance.
Yes, I have never been to Sundance.
But you have been to many other film festivals, so I'm sure you will figure it out. Sundance to me is very special because, before Slash Film, I would look to Sundance. It was inspiration. Filmmakers like Kevin Smith and Richard Linklater who were able to create these movies that were like these small independent things, not funded by, big studios, and able to get distribution deals. I was an aspiring filmmaker before I was started Slash Film. I was actually a volunteer at Sundance, volunteering my time just so I could be in Park City and see the movies. So Sundance is something very special to me. Brad, what is Sundance to you?
Yeah, this is, long before I became an entertainment news writer. I had dreamt of going to Sundance. I would always keep up on coverage. I was always excited to see the movies that got selected for the festival once they were picked up for distribution. And I think what I love about it is it's at the very beginning of the year, and it's a festival that starts a lot of buzz for a lot of these small movies, some of which can go on to get Oscar nominations. Whiplash being one of the most famous examples in recent memory. And I think it's just cool to be up in the mountains away from everything else and see these movies that no one has seen yet there, experience them for the first time. There's always an excitement around the festival of what people are seeing. Everyone in line is talking about, what have you seen? What have you liked? And there's just a great groundswell of support for these movies that comes out of Sundance and can often drive it all the way to the end. So it's just cool to be part of that and see these movies without any, really preconceived notions about what to expect.
Yeah, and I think it's cool, too, that, the buzz begins at Sundance for some of these big films, like The Big Sick, played at Sundance last year, didn't have a distributor, sparked a bidding war, Amazon bought it. Now, Big Sick is one of the biggest, one of the best films of the year. Call Me By Your Name. There was a bunch from this year. And it's not just like, these small indie dramas. Like the first year I was at Sundance in 2004, the first Saw film premiered at Sundance and became huge. So, that spawned a huge horror franchise. Ben, what does Sundance mean for you?
I mean, a lot of what Brad just said. I love the idea that it's in January. It's really like wiping the slate clean from the previous year and sort of laying out a lot of the big movies that are going to be, debuting throughout the rest of 2018. I also like how contained it is. I mean, there are some theaters that are sort of a little bit, more far-flung than others, but for the most part, a lot of at least when I've been to Sundance, a lot of the critics and writers and journalists all tend to sort of be in the same vicinity throughout the whole festival. So that sort of helps, build camaraderie and all of that. And it's cool to see people who, live on the other side of the country, like Brad and people that I don't get to see all the time. So, there's a social component to it, but also just like the really like laying the groundwork for and sort of setting the tone for what the year in movies can be.
And lastly, Chris, you've gone to the Toronto International Film Festival, which is kind of the, a lot of films premiere there that are award season films, but Sundance, I think, is a lot smaller. What are you anticipating from your first Sundance?
I don't know. It's a little surreal because I've always, been aware of the Sundance Film Festival, but I never really thought I would even ever go to it. And, at TIFF, by the time the films at TIFF come to TIFF, there's a lot of buzz about a lot of them, almost all of them. Whereas Sundance, everything is more or less new. I mean, there's some carryover. Like they're playing The Death of Stalin, and I actually saw that at last year's TIFF. But it's a little strange to have to sort of pick and choose through things with almost no buzz about them. I've never had to do that at a festival before, so I'm a little worried I'm going to end up picking duds, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, you do bring up an interesting point. Like, when you go to TIFF, you kind of have, like, these big filmmakers and big stars to kind of guide your way a little bit. And you've heard about some of these movies. Sundance, it's very much the slate of movies as a whole. I don't think any movie, other than the ones that premiered at other festivals ahead of time, any movie on this year's festival slate was something, I was that was on my radar. These movies are off the radar. So right now we're going to talk about our most anticipated films of Sundance. As Chris said, these could be duds. Many times I go to Sundance and I go into a film expecting greatness, and it is, not so great. They get submitted thousands of films to Sundance, and they choose a couple hundred. And even with those couple hundred, it's not all of them are great. But we wanted to, because we're going there, we're going to be covering it. We're going to be talking about it on the Slash Film Daily and on the site. We wanted to put some of these films on your radar because we're going to be checking them out over the next week and a half. So let's start things off. And we don't have an order for this. This is just a random order, a random assortment of films that are playing at Sundance that we are excited about. But let's start this off with Ben and American Animals.
Yes, Bart Layton is the director of this one. He made a movie called The Imposter, a documentary back in 2012 that I think it's been on Netflix, or that's how I watched it last year, or maybe the year before. It took me a little while to catch up with it, but that's a really fascinating movie, and I think people who are into documentaries have probably at least heard of this film. American Animals is his first narrative feature, so I'm excited to see sort of how he makes the jump between storytelling styles there. The plot synopsis is that the film tells, quote, the unbelievable but mostly true story of 4 young men who mistake their lives for a movie and attempt one of the most audacious art heists in U.S. history. Apparently it's based on a true story, or at least loosely based on a true story. So that's sort of fascinating. I'm a big fan of heist movies and the sort of meta construct of characters, mistaking their lives for a movie. That sounds like something that I'm interested in. And the cast includes Evan Peters from X-Men Days of Future Past and American Horror Story, Blake Jenner from Everybody Wants Some, Ann Dowd, who's been popping up in a ton of TV lately with The Leftovers and Handmaid's Tale. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, The Imposter is an amazing documentary. If you haven't seen it, not every film that comes out of Sundance that is good, gets discovered. But the vast majority does not. And The Imposter was a film I saw at Sundance that I really loved and had kind of had a cinematic take on a documentary. So it makes sense that he's going into narrative features. But let's go from that to Brad's first pick, The Catcher Was a Spy.
Yeah, this sounds like it has the potential to be really interesting. I'm kind of a sucker for these movies that take a person from one arena where they're extremely skilled and putting them somewhere where you necessarily wouldn't expect them to excel. And in this case, this movie, if you haven't figured it out by the title, Paul Rudd plays a Major League Baseball catcher who is recruited by the World War II equivalent of the CIA to stop a German scientist from building an atomic bomb for the Nazis. The character he plays is somebody who was extremely smart. He was very good on quiz shows, very very affable, and so he kind of makes the perfect person to turn into a spy. This also has an incredible cast along with Paul Rudd. It's got Jeff Daniels, it's got Guy Pearce, it's got Paul Giamatti, Mark Strong, Sienna Miller, and it's directed by Ben Lewin, who directed The Sessions, which was a big Sundance movie a while back with John Hawkes and Helen Hunt. And I'm really interested in this just because it kind of feels like a bit like an old school, almost Hitchcockian kind of thriller, with a guy who's being taken out of his element, put into a stressful situation. And I also just like the throwback title that feels like a movie that would have been made in like the 40s or 50s or something like that. So I'm interested to see what Paul Rudd does in a role like this, because even though he's recently been playing a superhero for Marvel, most of the time he's either in romantic comedies or just straight up comedies, and we haven't really seen him in a role like this before.
And my first pick is a film called 8th Grade. I'm a sucker for coming of age movies, and especially the subgenre of indie Sundance coming of age dramedies. I don't have much experience with him, but Bo Burnham is, a comedy actor. He's had some stand-up specials, I think. He's had supporting roles in films ranging from Funny People to The Big Sick. And this is his feature directorial debut. And it's about a teenager who is trying to survive that last week of her disastrous eighth grade year before leaving to start high school. This one comes from A24, the indie film company responsible for Moonlight, Room, Good Time, The Florida Project, The Disaster Artist, Lady Bird. So basically, to say they have a good track record is an understatement. So that is why Eighth Grade is on my most anticipated list. And let's get to Chris's first pick, and that is Lizzie.
This comes from a director named Craig William McNeil. He directed this indie horror movie called The Boy, which is very good and very disturbing. And he also directed the first season of Channel Zero, Candle Cove. And it focuses on, the notorious murders of Lizzie Borden, alleged murders, because she was acquitted, but pretty much everyone agrees that she did it. Chloe Sevigny plays Lizzie Borden. Kristen Stewart, who I'm a big fan of, just plays her maid. And the film is just about events both before and after the murders. I don't know a whole lot about the movie. I don't know what stance it's going to take. I'm interested in the director and the cast alone and the topic, because I'm a big fan of just true crime stories, especially older true crime stories like from this era. That alone has me very interested in the film.
Ben, I'm sorry to bother you, but what is your next pick on this list?
I see what you did there, Peter. It's a movie called Sorry to Bother You. This is the directorial debut of writer-director Boots Riley, who is a poet, a rapper, a producer. He's been sort of, on the outskirts of the artistic community for a long time, and this is his first, sort of deep dive into actually making a movie. The cast here is really the big selling point for me. Lakeith Stanfield from Atlanta, Tessa Thompson from Thor Ragnarok, Stephen Yeun from The Walking Dead, and Armie Hammer from Call Me By Your Name makes up the core cast of this movie. It's basically about a telemarketer who's played by Lakeith Stanfield, who discovers a magical selling power that lives inside of him, and Armie Hammer plays, quote, his cocaine-snorting, orgy-hosting, obnoxious, and relentlessly optimistic boss. So, what I wrote in our little write-up thing here, our little blurbs here, was that if you're not interested in this movie based on that information alone, I really don't know what to tell you, because that's all I need to be really stoked about this.
That sounds interesting. Brad, what is the next movie on your list?
I'm looking forward to seeing a movie called The Kindergarten Teacher, which stars Maggie Gyllenhaal. In addition to being a sucker for coming-of-age movies like Peter is, I'm also a sucker for, I guess what you could call a subgenre of those kinds of movies, which is movies about precocious young kids being teamed up with adults who try and help them out and achieve their dreams. And that's kind of what this movie is about. Maggie Gyllenhaal plays a kindergarten teacher who is kind of becoming numb to her life. She's a little bit frustrated. She's feels like she hasn't really achieved what she had originally set out to do. And the only real solace she gets from life is this evening poetry class that she takes in Lower Manhattan. And in that class, she meets this 5-year-old boy who is somehow this incredible poet. And so she goes out of her way to try and help him escape this, the banal life that she ended up living, and hoping that she can help him, achieve something greater and become, a great writer, a great poet, at great risk to her own personal life. And yeah, I like seeing stories like this, especially because it's always fascinating to see young talents discovered. Brooklyn Prince was another one this year from the Florida Project. It was just great to see a young actress like that come out of nowhere and give this incredible performance. And I'm interested to see what the young child actor in this movie can do alongside Maggie Gyllenhaal as well.
And the next film on my list is a film called Puzzle. And this is unfortunately a film that I'm not going to get to see at the festival because I think it plays on Wednesday after we leave. But it did seem interesting. It was on my most anticipated, and it stars Kelly MacDonald. She plays a suburban mom named Agnes who discovers a passion for solving jigsaw puzzles, which unexpectedly draws her into a new world where her life unfolds in ways she could have never imagined, quote unquote. The hobby turns into obsession, and Agnes finds herself in the unexpected world of puzzle competitions in a quest for self-awareness. As someone who has gotten sucked into many peculiar hobbies, board games, magic, etc., I can certainly relate to the idea of falling into this type of rabbit hole. And of course, I've always loved Kelly MacDonald's performances. Director Mark Turteltaub is best known for producing films such as Little Miss Sunshine, Colin Trevorrow's Safety Not Guaranteed, Liv Schreiber's Everything is Illuminated, and Jeff Nichols' Loving. I never saw his 2013 directorial debut, God's Behaving Badly, but the premise here is more than enough to have my attention. So that is the next movie on my list. And going from that, we're going back to Chris for Mandy.
Yeah, I feel like this is a film that I don't need to say that much about. It's got Nick Cage in it. He's covered in blood. The poster that it was just released shows him fighting someone with a chainsaw. It's from the director of Beyond the Black Rainbow, which was this very weird, stylistic horror movie. Everything about this just screams must see for me. It's literally about Nicolas Cage just fighting supernatural forces who come to ruin his life. So I will be seeing this, and I'm sure I will be loving it. So we'll see.
Okay, let's move on from that to Ben with the movie Tyrell.
Yeah, this one is not quite as bombastic, probably, as Mandy, but it stars Jason Mitchell, who sort of broke out with his performance as Eazy-E in Straight Outta Compton. Mitchell was also in Mudbound, which debuted at last year's Sundance Film Festival, and I think that movie probably has, maybe his best performance that we've seen from him yet. But I'm excited to see him sort of headline this movie, in which he plays a character named Tyler who spirals out of control when he realizes he's the only black person attending a weekend birthday party in a secluded cabin. So it's him and a bunch of white guys in a cabin, and there's like alcohol goes, there's a lot of drinking that gets involved, and I think Caleb Landry Jones, who actually starred in Get Out last year, and actually he starred in 10 movies last year or something. He was all over the place. He is also in this film. He's always like a weird sort of wiry guy to watch, and especially in something with this much potential for social commentary and things like that. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interesting things to talk about with Tyrell. This one comes from writer-director Sebastian Silva, who's a Sundance veteran. I think in 2013 he had 2 movies at Sundance, 2 like full-length narrative features. One was called Magic Magic, and the other one was called Crystal Fairy and the Magical Cactus. So, I haven't seen either of those. I haven't seen any of Silva's previous work, but that concept and the idea of Jason Mitchell really like top-lining a movie like this is something that I'm definitely interested in.
I saw Crystal Fairy, and it was weird. It was very weird. This film was not on my most anticipated list, but now after hearing you describe it, it seems like something I would like to see. But let's move on from that to a documentary film called Robin Williams' Come Inside My Mind. Brad, tell us about it.
Yeah, I love a good showbiz documentary, especially when it's about somebody that I admire and whose work I grew up with. So a documentary about Robin Williams, especially since, he left us all too soon a little while back, is something that I'm very excited to see, especially because it promises to have not just archive footage that we haven't seen before of him doing things like Making Mork and Mindy and, doing his insanely energetic comedy, but also interviews with people that were closest to him, like Billy Crystal, other comedians, and that kind of thing. These kind of documentaries are usually very basic. There's nothing revelatory about them as far as the filmmaking is concerned, but it's just the information that pours out of them and the stories told about their life and how they were behind the scenes and during the making of the movies that we watched and loved them in. I just love seeing stories like that, and especially when it comes to Robin Williams, somebody who was so energetic and was just this force of nature when it came to performing, both in comedy and drama. I can't wait to see what this documentary has to say about him.
Yeah, and there's also a documentary on Mr. Rogers that I actually want to see because I'm wondering, who was he? as a person. Do you know what I mean? Like, we
Yeah,
know
sure.
him from the show, but we don't know much about Mr. Rogers. But next up on my list is probably the most me film of this year's Sundance Film Festival, and that is a film called Summer of '84. This comes from the three directors of Turbo Kid, which premiered at the festival a couple years ago. It's a coming-of-age drama that sounds like Stranger Things meets Zodiac, meets what's the Alfred Hitchcock film where the guy's looking from across the way?
Rear Window.
Rear Window, yes. I don't know why I was blanking on that. But anyways, it's coming-of-age drama where the story follows a group of teenage friends who spend their summer spying on their police officer neighbor who they suspect is a serial killer. And, quote, as they get closer to discovering the truth, things get dangerous. We ran a trailer for this film on the site last week. You can go check it out. It looks like a solid throwback. I loved Turbo Kid when I saw it at the 2015 Sundance Film Festival. I don't think it got discovered that much by people, and I think if it came out after Mad Max Fury Road, maybe more people would have found it with its insane 70s tribute. If Summer of '84 is half as ambitious and audacious as Turbo Kid, I think we're all in for a treat. And that is my last pick. But we'll move on to the last pick of this list, and that is from Chris. It's a movie called Piercing.
So the director of this film is a guy named Nicholas Pesci. He directed a horror movie called The Eyes of My Mother, which is one of the best horror movies I've ever seen. It's just this very weird, unsettling, almost abstract sort of film. So on the basis of that alone, I'm very excited for what he does next. And what he does next is this film, which is adapted from a book, which I haven't read, but I've heard the book is very disturbing. So it seems like this guy has a niche, and that is disturbing films. And it's about a family man played by Christopher Abbott, who was in It Comes at Night and a bunch of other movies, who has a dark secret. And that dark secret is he wants to murder a prostitute. But when the prostitute shows up at the hotel room he rented, things don't go according to plan. Again, this is one of those films I don't know a lot about, but just based on the people involved with it, I'm really interested in seeing it.
And now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You know, we each listed 3 films we wanted to see, but we're going to see, a dozen, maybe 24 films at this year's festival. So keep listening to the Slash Film Daily and reading slashfilm.com. We'll have written reviews on there. We'll have our thoughts on the movies we liked on here. And, we'll keep you updated on what films that you'll want to be looking out for when they come to your neck of the woods from the Sundance Film Festival. And that does it for today's Slash Film Daily. You can find more on all the stories we mentioned today on slashfilm.com, linked in the show notes. Slash Film Daily is published every weekday, bringing you the most exciting news from the world of movies and television, as well as deeper dives into the features from slashfilm.com. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Overcast, all the popular podcast apps. Please feel free to send your feedback, questions, comments, concerns to peter@slashfilm.com, and leave your name and general geographic location in case we mention the email on there. Please go rate and review this podcast on iTunes and spread the word. Tell your friends. We will see you tomorrow.